Welcome to the Urban Affairs Program. It's time to get up for Urban Perspectives with your host, Pete Rhodes.
Thank you for joining us here on Urban Perspectives. I'm your host, Pete Rhodes. On this show, we will introduce you to three individuals whose personal contributions in aviation, education, law, mentoring, and sports provide outstanding examples for our communities. Meet former Minnesota Supreme Court Justice Alan Page, Hamline University President Fayneese Miller, Dr. Fayneese Miller, and United Airlines pilot Floyd Balentine. It's all here on Urban Perspectives. My first guest came to prominence as a first-round draft choice for the Minnesota Vikings in 1967. He played in 218 games, 6-time All-Pro, 9 times Pro Bowl selection, NFL's MVP in 1971, and inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He was elected to the Minnesota Supreme Court in 1992 as the first African-American on the court, serving until 2015. He is the founder, along with his wife Diane, of the Page Education Foundation. Please welcome to Urban Perspectives the Honorable Alan Page. How you doing, Judge?
I'm good, thank you.
I'm so glad to have you here. I think the last time we kind of met was when they put the goalpost up over at the boys' club or shelter over there.
Yes,
yeah.
Over in South Minneapolis.
In South
right?
Minneapolis.
Right.
That's when Coach Tice was with the Minnesota Vikings, and
Exactly.
we had a chance to meet, and I did a little interview with you for some previous stuff that we used to do. So I'm so glad to have you here, and we often see you as we walk around the lakes. You're normally around a lot earlier than us, and we're catching you on your way in.
When we're finishing up.
Yeah, it's still good, still good.
It's good to be out there.
Yeah, it is, it is. So growing up, I guess I want to ask you, where were your role models? Who were your role models in sports as well as in academics?
I really didn't have any sports role models. I wasn't particularly interested in sports for the most part as a young man. I would go out and play. I liked doing that,
Yeah.
but organized sports just didn't hit me until I was a freshman in high school.
Wow, that's interesting.
Beyond that, Thurgood Marshall,
Yes.
Martin Luther King Jr., and a whole host of people who were involved in the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s had a tremendous influence on me. But the reality is, like most of us, the most influential people were my parents and family.
Yeah. So as a young man growing up, as you talked about in the 60s, how did the struggle strengthen your resolve for success, you think, Justice Page?
It's hard to say how the struggle itself. I knew from very early on that to be successful, you had to work hard and to overcome whatever the obstacles were.
Okay.
And my parents, one of the things that they stressed with me, not that they quite understood it in this context, but it was seeking excellence, being good at what you do, not for whatever the rewards might be, but to push yourself to find out who you are.
Okay.
And in doing that, that helped me a lot in terms of not being distracted by the racism, by whatever the obstacle may have been.
At that time, yeah.
Because when if you seek excellence, be the best that you can be, it allows you to overcome a lot of that.
Yeah, I see. Great point. Well, you said high school you began to get into sports, so we all know that you are a celebrated collegiate as well as a professional athlete. But what made you choose law after that career?
I was interested in the law
first,
much earlier than I was interested in football. My interest in the law started 3rd, 4th, 5th grade.
Okay.
Probably a little too much Perry Mason, but also I can still remember reading newspaper articles about the Supreme Court's decision in Brown versus the Board of Education. I was 8 years old at that time.
Yeah, fascinated by it.
And that captured me.
Yeah.
The notion that the law had the power to change an education system and then ultimately in the process change lives and create hope. That had a big impact on me.
Yeah, that was great. That's great. So as we look now forward at your Minnesota Supreme Court Justice career, what was one of your most impactful decisions, you think?
I never, people ask that question. They also ask the question.
I thought that was a unique question.
They asked that question, what was, the most important or the most impactful?
Of course.
And I didn't look at cases like that. My focus was what are the facts, what are the law, and how do we get to the best decision? And once you start looking at this one's more important than the next one or the last one,
skews your...
Well, all of a sudden you're in it deciding what's important and not trying to figure out what the law is.
I see.
And I think that's a dangerous path to go down.
How was it sitting on the court overall? I mean, you were the first African American to be elected that, and just sitting on that court with the other individuals.
The most fascinating, challenging, fun thing I've ever done in my life.
Really?
Being in the room when we're in conference, working through difficult and complex issues, trying to understand where they're coming from, the other members of the court, and trying to articulate where I was coming from, and trying to make it all fit together.
Right. Nothing like it.
Nothing like it, nothing better.
I want to ask you now, as we move to your foundation, has awarded over 12 million grants since 1988. Can you explain the work of the Page Foundation for us?
We started in 1988 with the idea of encouraging, motivating, and assisting young men and women of color pursue education beyond high school. I spent a lot of time and continue to spend a lot of time in schools and classrooms. And for far too many of our young children of color, there was a disconnect between what they were doing in the classroom and their futures. And my wife Diane and I thought that we could impact that. So we do two things. One, we provide financial assistance to students going to Minnesota schools. And two, more importantly, we require our grant recipients, we call them Page Scholars.
Yes.
We require them to work with young children, kindergarten through 8th grade, specifically in the area of education.
That's great.
So that those young children can see someone who looks like them, who maybe has some shared experience with them, using education as a tool for their futures. So that those young people can have at least the beginnings of an understanding that, hey, there's something I can do in life. There is hope.
Right. Fantastic job. I know you've written books with your daughter, and you've got this now that you retired from the bench to work forward on, and great job in what you're doing. We really appreciate you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, Justice Alan Page, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Stay right where you are, because I want to say when we return, we've got just another fantastic show as we meet the 20th president, only the second female and the first African-American president in the history of Hamline University. Dr. Fayneese Miller will join me next here on Urban Perspectives. Welcome back to Urban Perspectives. The chair of the Hamline University Board of Trustees says my next guest is a dynamic and inclusive leader with a strong commitment to diversity, whose values, voices, and respect for student and facility as well as the faculty is a part of her making. She brings 3 decades of academic and higher education leadership to her new role as president of Hamline University. I am so proud to welcome to Urban Perspectives Dr. Fayneese Miller. Dr. Miller, thank you for joining us here.
Thank you.
We first met at the opening of Aquila and the Bee. I would gather that was a good show for you as it was for us. Yeah, it was really cool. So, how you liking Minnesota so far?
I like Minnesota.
You do?
Yes, I do.
Good.
Even the weather.
Even the weather?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's a first. Well, let's get right into it and ask, when did you just decide, because I was reading your bio and it is just fantastic. When did you decide that education was going to be your life's career?
You know, I made that decision when I was in the 7th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a civics teacher who had us research careers. And I thought I wanted to be a psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized I didn't want to be a psychiatrist, I want to be a psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
And being a psychologist, it meant that I had to go on and get more education.
Okay.
And getting more education meant that I would end up in higher education. So that's what it was. It was my civics teacher when I was in middle school.
You never know what's going to touch you.
No.
It's in middle school.
Yes.
Wow, that's great. Now, what prompted your decision then to accept, besides liking Minnesota, the position as president at Hamline University?
Well, you know, when you go on these interviews, you do a lot of work to find out whether or not the institution is one that fits with what you believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And Hamline has a long history of inclusion.
Okay.
If you go back to the fact that the first 2 graduates at the undergrad and undergrad level were women, it was also the first institution in Minnesota. But what I also discovered is that Hamline had a major role in preparing the professors who went on to be, the teachers who went on to be professors at the HBCUs. And a lot of people didn't realize that. And that was important to me, that Hamline had a commitment to inclusion at every level.
Well, as we segue from that inclusion, which is such an important piece, and I agree with you, you were a former director of Brown University's Center for Study of Race and Ethnicity in America. How did that influence your position on diversity and inclusion and the importance of it in higher education?
Well, you know, that played a major role, but my interest in those areas started long before my taking on the leadership of that center.
I see.
Also at Brown, I was the first African American to be promoted and tenured, and that was in the 1990s.
Yeah.
And I always had this belief that Brown needed to be involved in something very different. So I really got involved in the community and bringing the community into Brown. But really my interest in issues of race and ethnicity began with my parents, who were civil rights workers.
Okay.
So that was that long history in saying you got to make sure that you're doing what you need to do, and as you do it, you're bringing people along with you. So when I became the director of that center, I made sure that other people of color felt as though Brown University was their institution.
Yeah, that's really admirable, because sometimes it doesn't happen that way, and but if we go into it with that attitude, it can make amazing things happen. That's great, Doctor. Now, you've had a commitment to public as well as community service throughout your career that I've read. How will you continue that here in Minnesota?
However Minnesota wants to use me, I'm ready.
Okay.
But I will tell you that I've always been involved with young people. When I was at Brown, when I directed the center, I had a program that I called the Research Apprenticeship Program.
Okay.
It stands for RAP. And what I did there was to bring high school students to Brown and teach them how to be researchers. Now, there was an ulterior motive there, in that many of these young people never saw higher ed as part of their future. Making them a part of Brown made them think about themselves in a very different way. So I'm hoping here that people will see me, young people will see me as a role model, that my life and my upbringing isn't that very different from theirs. And that if I could do it, they could do it. So if I can reach out and bring them to Hamline, make them feel a part of Hamline very early on, and see the possibility for themselves. So however Minnesota, the Twin Cities, can use me to narrow that achievement gap, to improve economic disparities for people of color, then I'm ready to do it.
That's great, Doctor. I'm sure they're going to take you up on that now that you've made it public here on Urban Perspectives. What are your top 3 goals then, as you now look at Hamline University, which is a historic has a rich history. What are your new goals, goals as president now of Hamline?
Well, one of the things I do want to do is to create multiple opportunities of entrance to Hamline University. We think of you graduate from high school, you go on to university, but there's some young people who aren't quite ready for that. So what role can Hamline play to make sure that when it comes time for them to enroll, they can? So I want Hamline to be front and center of creating opportunities, higher ed opportunities for all people in Minnesota, but especially young people of color. So getting more involved in the education and how do we make sure they're prepared? So it's not just leaving high school and going on to university, but what role can Hamline play to make sure they're prepared when they're ready to begin that academic study? So that's one thing that I want to do. The other thing is that you probably know that Hamline University School of Law merged with William Mitchell School of Law, and we now the Mitchell-Hamline School of Law. What we're doing at Hamline now, which I'm really excited about, is that we're creating a Center for Justice and Law. The whole idea of that is to get our undergraduates thinking about law and justice and more than just going on to law school.
I see.
I'm a psychologist who did research very early on with the courts in Rhode Island. Truancy courts, which is school-based truancy courts. So letting them know what are the legal opportunities for them, what ways in which they can think about themselves as somehow connected to this legal community in ways other than just being an attorney, even though that's a good way as well. And the other thing that I want to do, that all presidents want to do, is make sure that we're maintaining or growing the financial health of the institution.
For sure.
So that's a vision of mine to make sure that Hamline is financially viable, it's stable, and that it can create opportunities for students.
A lot of work ahead of you, but I'm sure you can do it.
Well, with your help and the communities.
You got it.
Thank you.
Dr. Miller, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Coming up next, meet an aviator whose passion for flying began early and continues today as a pilot and a mentor for the next generation of aviators. We'll fly the friendly skies with Captain Floyd Balentine after this here on Urban Perspectives. Thank you for joining us here on Urban Perspectives. My next guest has been passionate about aviation since the age of 5. He is alumni of Minneapolis North High School and holds a bachelor's degree of science in aviation from St. Cloud State University. He's the founder of the Twin Cities Aviation Career Education Academy and currently serves as an upcoming pilot for United Airlines. I'm delighted to introduce Captain Floyd Balentine to Urban Perspectives. Floyd, thanks so much. We met you just recently, and you were telling us your story. We were recruiting you for the show at the same time. So thank you so much for being here. You and my niece Bianca were recognized recently with the First Friday program, and well deserved as well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me on your show.
What inspired you, Captain Balentine, to choose aviation at the early age of 5?
You know, I was born in Chicago, Illinois, and shortly after that, my mother moved me and my 2 older brothers here from Chicago.
Yeah.
And you know, everywhere me and my mother went on it was on an airplane. Yeah. And you know, it was just, I got hooked from the power of the aircraft, from watching something big become small in the air. Yeah. You know, and I've always told my mother that, you know, I'm going to become a pilot. She never believed me. And you know, now today she's proud of her young man.
Now it's Captain Floyd Balentine.
Yes,
Balentine.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Balentine. I've been calling you Balentine. It's actually Balentine. So, who are some of your role models then in this profession? I'm sure there's some even here locally.
Yes. You know, I have several, but to name a few, a friend of mine by the name of Eric Poole. You know, I've always been passionate about becoming a pilot. Yeah. But I grew up in the projects in North Minneapolis, so I really didn't know the avenues to take to get to where I'm at today. Okay. And Eric Poole was that guy that showed me, you know, the plan to make it happen. Yeah. You know, so Eric Poole, he was that mentor for me that I needed to give me that spark to become a pilot, to actually get in that cockpit and feel comfortable. Yeah. And you know, with the ACE Academy, another one is Woody Fountain.
Yes,
Woody
I
Fountain.
said on the Monitors Club with Woody Fountain. He's our Sergeant of Arms.
Okay.
He's a great guy.
Okay, he is. You know, he's been a light to me since I've met him, and he's really humble, and he loves giving back to the community.
Yeah, he really does. Funny guy too.
Very funny guy. Very funny guy.
Now, you're the founder of that organization we were just talking. You just alluded to. What is its mission, Captain?
You know, I started the Twin Cities Ace Academy in 2013, and it was me and two other friends. Victor Smith,
okay.
He's a pilot over at Delta, and Donald Gardner, he's a first officer at United along with me. And you know, we've always wanted to give back, and so for the last 15 years, I've always went into Minneapolis, St. Paul, public high schools, and the schools in St. Paul as well.
Yeah.
And you know, when I wear this uniform,
Yeah.
a lot of the kids can't see themselves in this uniform.
Yeah.
And so what I said to myself is, when I get into a position to give back to my community that I grew up in, which is North Minneapolis, and be effective at it, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And so what we started in 2013 was the Twin Cities Ace Academy. And the mission is simply to cultivate, educate, and empower our youth to know that they can do more than play basketball or football. That's fine. But what about becoming a pilot?
Yeah.
What about becoming an astronaut?
Yeah.
You know, that's our goal at the Twin Cities Ace Academy.
So important. Now, how are you selected for, or are they recruited for the ACE program? And how is it funded, Captain?
You know, one thing, normally this program would cost $600 per kid, but for the Twin Cities Ace Academy, it's $75. And that puts a little bit of pressure on me, which I'm fine. I have to raise $20,000 per year.
Yes.
And you know, what I do is build relationships within the community, because there's so many people out there that love giving back to programs such as the Twin Cities Ace Academy.
Yeah.
You just got to get out there and
ask for it.
Yeah. Yes.
Exactly.
And so for me, it's just that's what it is. You can go to the website and find out more information. But what we do is we go to all the high schools and we recruit.
Oh, okay.
You know, we build relationships with the students,
I
and
see.
just so and the parents, because we're going to be working with their kids.
Exactly.
And so I want them to be comfortable in dealing with who I am. So.
Now, what are your career goals? I think you've already obtained them. You're a pilot, United Airlines, you've done other stuff, but
Yes.
I noticed that your journey was not just to start as a pilot, but you learned the back end as well.
Yes. You know, well, I'm a strong believer of giving back to people that sold into me. So that's why I have my hands in a lot of different things in the community.
Yeah.
But, you know, I start my first job, or my next step is to go to United Airlines.
Yeah.
I start soon here. I'm excited about that,
I'm sure,
because
yeah.
reaching to your highest level of your career is something that, you know, you want to get to and be all that you can be. And so my next step is to just give back in all that I can do and continue to inspire our youth in the community.
Fantastic job. Well, you've inspired us.
Thank you.
And continue to do so. And we've got you back over here as well. Let's make not this the last time.
Yes, sir.
Captain Floyd Balentine. Balentine. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching Urban Perspective. Visit our website where you can find out more information on our guests and links to previous broadcasts. And like us and post on our Facebook page. And remember, there are so many amazing people and positive stories, and you can watch for them right here on Urban Perspectives. I'm your host, Pete Rhodes, and I'll see you next week.